So AEW Dynamite this week was huge, absolutely ginormous ratings. It's the second biggest AEW Dynamite rating or audience of all time. It's the largest audience since they had their debut in 2019 because Wednesday's new edition of AEW Dynamite featuring TNT champion Darby Allin retaining over Matt Hardy in the main event drew 1.219 million live viewers on TNT. This is according to Nielsen via Showbuzz Daily. Now, it should be noted, of course, and this is why everyone is very much talking about this, not just because of the big number, obviously, but it should be noted that this was the first Dynamite episode to air unopposed after NXT moved to Tuesday night. So that's very, very, very significant. And also, let's compare it. We'll talk about AEW in a second and how significant that is for AEW because, don't get me wrong, it's an absolutely ginormous number for them. But let's look at both sides of the coin here. Let's look at NXT and let's also look at AEW. So NXT draws 805,000 viewers on Tuesday night and AEW draws over 1.2 million viewers on Wednesday night. That's fantastic for both. That's absolutely fantastic for both promotions already in the very first week, where both promotions are not airing in competition with each other. One's airing on a Tuesday, one's airing on a Wednesday. Already we have beneficial results for both, and that's fantastic. That's absolutely brilliant. Now, this AEW viewership is up 77% from last week's show, which drew 688,000 live viewers on TNT. Dynamite ranked number 2 in the cable top 150 this week with a 0.44 rating in the 18 to 49 key demographic. This is up 57% from last week's show, which ranked 5th with a 0.28 rating in the key demographic. This week's Dynamite show ranked 26th in viewership, which is up from last week's 60th ranking. This is Dynamite's best viewership since their debut episode drew 1.41 million viewers on October 2nd, 2019, and their best 18 to 49 key demo rating since the October 23, 2019 episode, which drew a 0.45. This week's Dynamite viewership was up 77% from last week, while this week's key demographic was up 57%. This week's Dynamite viewership was also up 78.5% from the same week in 2020. This week's 18 to 49 demographic was up 76% from the same week in 2020 as well. So just across the board, significantly, absolutely fantastic numbers for AEW Dynamite. You can't look against it any other way. It's absolutely fantastic numbers for Dynamite, and congratulations. First of all, let's talk about congratulations. But now we have to really start talking about WWE and NXT and what purpose it actually served on Wednesday nights. Because now it's very apparent, isn't it? It's very apparent, and this is what I've been saying for a really long time, and I know sometimes I've said this here on the channel or I've said it on social media, and people's responses has been, that's not true, that's not necessarily the case, you're looking too much into it, oh, that's not true, it's not all about competition. But look, for me, NXT, the sole reason they were on Wednesday nights, and you can talk about them being, we were on Wednesdays first and all that kind of BS. But the sole reason they were on the USA Network on Wednesday nights in the same time slot in competition to AEW Dynamite was to take viewers away from Dynamite. That's the reason they were on there, is to take viewers away from Dynamite. And we have now seen, and the evidence was there last year. This is nothing new as well. I think this is worth mentioning, is that this was nothing new because AEW did cross 1 million a couple of times last year when they didn't have competition from NXT. But the sole reason that NXT was on Wednesdays was to take viewers away from AEW Dynamite. Now they're not there. The viewers no longer have to make a choice, which as a fan is a fantastic thing. And for the talent in both companies is a fantastic thing. There is no longer this pressure on ratings or anything like that. But I think the surprising element of this big number from AEW Dynamite on Wednesday was that NXT was taking away more viewers than I think we thought. And I think we realized, I think a lot of people thought, well, NXT's probably taking away some viewers, but most of the time, because AEW is arguably the better product or the more popular product anyway, that possibly NXT's taking away, a marginal amount of viewers. It's not. It was taking away far, far more, really far more viewers than we anticipated, because let's look at it as well. Obviously, this week on Dynamite, you did have obviously a relatively loaded show. You had Mike Tyson there as the special enforcer, but you didn't have Jon Moxley and you didn't have some other names on the show. And let's be honest, this is coming off the back of a WWE week. WWE, they've been the main promotion over the course of the last week because it's been WrestleMania, it's been the Hall of Fame, it's been NXT TakeOver, and AEW, like the other promotions, have had to sort of take a back seat and realize that WWE are doing their thing, we'll just keep doing our thing, and there's no point loading up shows because we're not going to outdraw them because it's WWE's week. So, yes, it had Mike Tyson, but this was hardly an AEW special. This was hardly an AEW grand episode, a huge episode that they really stacked. So it makes you wonder, now that they're unopposed every Wednesday night, and when they do have their specials and they do actually load up the show, there could be some massive numbers coming in the future. I mean, Blood and Guts is about less than a month away. What is it, May 4th, May 5th? And 1.2 million... This is on a regular episode of Dynamite. What happens when they have that Blood and Guts episode in a few weeks' time? Because people are saying, well, if this got 1.2 million, who's to say it can't get 1.5? And if AEW Dynamite, I mean, and the proof will be in the pudding if in the course of the next couple of weeks, if Dynamite next week is getting over 1 million again and it's 1.2, 1.1, or even 1 million, then that million mark is there to stay. And once they're across that million viewer threshold, then you have to start saying, well, wait a minute, Raw, I know Raw was it 2 million this week or something like that, but Raw, its average over the course of the last year has been 1.6, 1.7, 1.8 million viewers. And Raw, because this is what Raw does, every single year Raw has the record low. It's become an annual tradition at this point, is at some point this year, Raw will have a number that is so bad, and it will be a new record low, and this will be outside of the holidays as well. It will be a new record low, and everyone will panic in WWE. Now, last year it was something like 1.6 million viewers. For reference, Dynamite did 1.21 million viewers on Wednesday night this week. That's a difference of 400,000. That's not, in the grand scheme of things, a massive amount of people. So considering that WrestleMania's come and gone, I know there are other big events to come this year, whether it's SummerSlam, Survivor Series, whatever, Money in the Bank, you can name them. But let's be honest here, Raw will have the slump this year. Especially once they get past the summer months, they will have the slump. And the question then will be, will Dynamite have the same slump, or will Dynamite continue to rise? Because there is definitely a real possibility right now. There's a real possibility that at some point, these two things are going to meet. Raw is going to be going down, Dynamite's going to be coming up, and they will meet. They will meet at some point. And this was my point. This was my whole point when I said that NXT's sole purpose was to take viewers away from AEW Dynamite, because it comes down to the value. It then comes down to the value of the show. Because WWE is getting paid handsomely, absolutely handsomely, for Monday Night Raw on the USA Network. NBC Universal's paying them a pretty penny. They really are. I think the television contract's worth something like, it's over $1 billion. I think it's a bit more than $1 billion. So, I mean, Raw and SmackDown's television deals get them nearly like $3 billion over the course of 5 years. So the point being is that the television right deals, specifically for Monday Night Raw from NBC Universal to WWE, is very lucrative, very lucrative. The reason why is because despite the low ratings, or the lower ratings than pro wrestling has historically received, and the low viewership, it's still, in comparison to lots of other programs, pro wrestling is still a very safe bet. Pro wrestling is still a very safe bet for obviously drawing a large crowd at the event when you can do that, but it's also a safe bet for drawing a decent audience on cable. And it's also a good bet for drawing a lot of social media interaction, because it's still very popular. It trends, pretty much most shows trend if they're on a decent cable network. So cable networks are always on the lookout for all of these pro wrestling programs, because in this day and age when there's so many different programs on, they do pretty well. So obviously WWE, because they're WWE as well, they're a dynasty, they're an institution, they can charge a pretty penny for Monday Night Raw. The issue then becomes, if Dynamite on a Wednesday night starts to outdraw Monday Night Raw on a Monday, NBC Universal can then look at WWE and say, wait a minute, on TNT, Warner Media are paying AEW Dynamite a fraction of what we're paying for Monday Night Raw, and they're getting a bigger audience and a younger audience. Suddenly Monday Night Raw is not that valuable anymore. NBC Universal can go to WWE and say, why are we paying you all of this money when a show on Wednesdays that is not receiving as much money is doing better. Suddenly the value of Raw just starts to dip very quickly. And that's ultimately, and I know this kind of is like 4D chess that people will say, nah, the WWE, they're not smart enough to play that. They're not smart enough to do that. They really are, because they can see the writing on the wall. Vince McMahon has made a career, maybe not so much in the world of creative in terms of WWE programming nowadays, but certainly in the world of business. He's a very shrewd businessman, and he can see in terms of negotiations, wait a minute, if AEW succeeds, if AEW Dynamite thrives and becomes one of the most viewed pro wrestling programs on television, then our product suddenly doesn't become that valuable. And that's where they really hurt WWE. It's not about hurting them in terms of the ratings, it's about hurting them in the wallet. It's about AEW's product then becoming more financially expensive, or financially valuable rather, than a Raw or SmackDown. Now, I don't think anytime soon AEW Dynamite's going to outdraw SmackDown. SmackDown's on network television. They've got bigger shows. It's on Fox. I just don't see it. Raw, on the other hand, I mean, a couple of months ago, if you'd have said, can AEW Dynamite outdraw Monday Night Raw, most people would have gone, it just can't. Considering the competition and considering the history of what AEW has drawn on a Wednesday night, it would take some significant drop by WWE Monday Night Raw for them to level up, because Dynamite was getting 800, on a good week 900, but some weeks 700, 600,000 viewers. That's what they were getting. And Raw, as I mentioned, does the 1.7, 1.8, 1.9, 1.7, 1.8 is really the average over the course of the last year. That's what Raw does. So I would have said absolutely not. Now, unopposed, on not a massively special Dynamite, and not with all of its big stars on the show as well, now that Dynamite's drawing 1.2 million viewers, suddenly you do start to ask yourself the question of, I mean, where can they go? They can go, they can continue to climb, because more viewers now, because the proof's in the pudding, the data's there, more viewers now are tuning into Dynamite than had done previously, live anyway. We don't know about, DVRs or on demand or social media views and stuff like that. But more viewers now are tuning in live to Dynamite than they were previously. They're sampling the product. And will they come back for more? Will they tell friends? Will they tweet about it? Will they post about it? All of these things start to add up. And the next thing you know, the ratings, the viewership will start to climb. And as I mentioned, Raw will drop, because that's what Raw does. It has it has its best numbers at the start of the year as we head into WrestleMania season. They might pick up around SummerSlam, but after that, they'll go. Once you get into that second half of the year, it's just a constant, they'll just continue going down. And then you have to start to wonder, if Dynamite starts to pick up and Raw starts to go down, who's to say at some point this year Dynamite doesn't do a better viewership than Raw? And if that does happen, that is very, very, very significant. Very significant. And again, it will make you wonder that maybe Wednesday having NXT wasn't a bad thing for WWE, because they see the threat that AEW can be now. They really can. And now, after what happened yesterday, now I'm not saying Samoa Joe going to AEW is going to make them draw a bigger viewership base than Monday Night Raw, but a name like Joe coming into the AEW roster, that's another thing that just builds it up a level. And it's those building blocks that will threaten WWE. Now, I don't know if we're going to get a Samoa Joe versus CM Punk match in AEW. I would probably bet against it. I think you'd more likely, if Punk was to have a match in AEW, to have it against Kenny Omega. But who's to say? This number is really, really significant. It really is significant by AEW, and it's a massive statement. I think it's a middle finger in the face of people that said that they couldn't draw, because now you see, actually, with no competition, they really can. And if they can build up some momentum with this is very, very significant, very significant. And to be honest, when it comes to the competition with WWE, just because they're not on the same night, in the same time slot, doesn't mean they're not in competition. Now, just because they're on different nights, they will still be compared. They will still absolutely be compared. So obviously, we've seen, as I said, the proof is in the pudding that this is better for both promotions. As a fan, I think it's better. And who knows? Because, as I mentioned, this wasn't a special edition of Dynamite. And if this wasn't a special edition of Dynamite, what happens when we get to Blood and Guts in a couple of weeks? What happens as we starting to get closer to Double or Nothing and get closer to All Out, those big pay-per-views for AEW? That's very significant as well. What happens when more names come into AEW? Maybe like a Samoa Joe. Who knows? Like a CM Punk. It's not out of the realm of possibility now that they can be challenging with Monday Night Raw. And once they do, if they do, that changes the landscape. That changes the landscape massively for AEW and WWE. It really does. Last night's, Wednesday's rating came out yesterday, but last night's rating and viewership for AEW Dynamite should serve as a warning for WWE. I know they'll say, well, we're not on those nights anymore, it doesn't matter, but if it's a pro wrestling company and if they're nearing in on your viewership numbers, it's competition and you have to pay attention to that. They absolutely have to pay attention to that. So it's certainly going to be fascinating. It's going to be fascinating to see if this number holds up over the course of the next few weeks. Personally, I don't see why it wouldn't. The disappointing thing now will be is when they do these TV specials, if they're only doing 1.2 million. That should be the basis going forward. Now, I don't know if it will be. You could say that maybe 1.2 million people tuned in this week, and maybe people didn't like it. Maybe they won't tune back in next week. It was a very strong show. With some fantastic matches. I think if you were watching it for the first time, you probably would think, well, I'm going to stick around next week. So this is a really interesting time. It's a great number for AEW. I'm not saying this as like a massive AEW stan or someone that hates WWE. I'm a pro wrestling fan. I think if you're watching this video, you tune into this channel, it's because you're a pro wrestling fan as well. And we should celebrate these companies doing great numbers, irrespective of who it is. If it's WWE, if it's AEW, if it's Impact Wrestling, if it's whoever. A number like this is really significant for the world of pro wrestling. And I'm really glad to see it because I think it opens up a lot of doors. And, you know, if this was a couple of years ago, and those people yesterday that unfortunately got released, if this was a couple of years ago, they would be worried. Where do I go next? Where am I going to find the next job? Where am I going to find the next booking? There are options right now. Despite a pandemic, there are options. Whether it is AEW or Impact or Ring of Honor or New Japan or wherever, there are a load of options right now, and they're all doing very well. And that's fantastic to see. That's fantastic to see. So this is a really exciting time. This is a really exciting number. Congratulations to everyone involved with AEW, and who knows, we'll have to see if this can stay up over the course of the next few weeks. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on AEW Dynamite drawing the largest audience since the program's debut, drawing over 1.2 million viewers on TNT? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.